Today I'm here to announce that our office will be filing charges against Nick Reiner, who is accused of killing his parents, actor-director Rob Reiner, and photographer-producer Michele Reiner.
Los Angeles police speaking just a short time ago. We have brand new information in the murders of Hollywood legend Rob Reiner and his wife Michele. Their own son is reportedly now in custody, accused of killing them with a knife.
I kind of knew that I wanted to relapse, basically.
And that is Nick Reiner, in his own words, appearing on the Dopey podcast in 2018, talking about his struggles with addiction. What we now know about what potentially led up to the fatal confrontation inside of the LA mansion Sunday night, and what the relationship recently was really like between Rob and Michele Reiner and their son. We're on the case presented by Law and Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. It has become obvious since Rob and Michele Reiner were found dead in their home that their son Nick has battled demons in his life. And it's also become clear that this family really struggled in trying to help Nick in recent years. Right now, Nick Reiner, 32 years old, is being held here at the county jail in Los Angeles. He's being held on a $4 million bond. Police say they believe that this 32-year-old is responsible for the deaths of his mom and dad.
These charges will be 2 counts of first-degree murder with the special circumstance of multiple murders. He also faces a special allegation that he personally used a dangerous and deadly weapon, that being a knife. These charges carry a maximum sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole or the death penalty. No decision at this point has been made with respect to the death penalty.
Police and the district attorney in Los Angeles just gave a news conference a short time ago. I will say they did not release much information on the investigation or what they found on the scene, but they did announce that Nick Reiner has been charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. Police confirmed they believe that Reiner used a knife to allegedly kill his parents. Now, they don't have an exact time of when they believe the Reiners were murdered. They're waiting on more information from the coroner on that. They also said that Nick Reiner is currently going through the process of being medically cleared at the county jail, and once he's cleared, he will go to the courthouse, face a judge, and enter a plea. And we just learned who may be Nick Reiner's attorney. It's a major name in the world of criminal defense, Alan Jackson, the same attorney who represented Karen Reed in her case where she was accused of killing her boyfriend, Boston police officer John O'Keefe. This just came down per TMZ. Now, Rob Reiner, that man was Hollywood royalty. He and his wife Michele were reportedly found with their throats slit inside their Brentwood neighborhood home in Los Angeles on Sunday afternoon. That is according to TMZ. Their bodies were allegedly found by their adult daughter. LA firefighters were called to the house for a medical assist around 3:30 Pacific time in the afternoon Sunday. Now, before we go on, if you don't know who Rob Reiner was, you most certainly know his work, his movies. He rose to fame in the 70s, first as an actor on the show All in the Family that aired between 1971 and 1979, but he wasn't done when it came to his career because he went on into directing, and he is a legend in that space in both comedies and in dramas. In 1989, he directed When Harry Met Sally, absolute classic starring Billy Crystal and Meg Ryan. Then in 1992, he directed one of the best dramas of all time, I think, A Few Good Men, the movie with Tom Cruise that was nominated for Best Picture at the Oscars. Now, as far as his personal life, he met his wife Michele while he was directing When Harry Met Sally. She was a photographer. They got married in 1989, and they went on to have 3 children together. And one of those kids is Nick, who we're going to talk a lot more about in just a moment. With so much success, the Reiners were obviously powerful people in Hollywood, not just in show business, but also politics. Former President Barack Obama actually told Jimmy Kimmel Monday night that he and former First Lady Michele, they were going to see the Reiners on Sunday. To this point, it does seem like the weekend for the Reiners, it was relatively typical. Monty Python actor Eric Idle, he wrote on X, Rob Reiner was a lovely man. I spoke to him last night for over an hour. I always enjoyed his company. I met him at his dad's in 1975. He was telling me about filming at Stonehenge and his thoughts for the future. This is so awful. I shall miss him. A clever, talented, and very thoughtful man. So awful. For as typical as the weekend may have seemed to the Reiners, we're also learning that the 24 hours before their murders, there were some warning signs that something may have been wrong. Those warning signs were related to their 32-year-old son, Nick Reiner. It's important to understand the issues that Nick has battled in his life.
Hey, what's up?
There he is, Nick Reiner.
So this is an episode of a podcast that talks about the struggles of addiction. It's called Dopey, and Nick Reiner was a guest multiple times on this podcast. The episode we found was from 7 years ago, where the host talked to Nick about his history of addiction. I'm going to play for you what Nick said about his struggles in just a moment. But I also want to show you this. We found Nick's Facebook page. It appears he hasn't posted since around 2018, but this is a picture of Nick with his dad. Now in 2016, people spoke to Nick about his battles with addiction, and he told the outlet that he went to rehab starting when he was 15 years old. And he also says he went to rehab 17 times in total. He co-wrote a film that was directed by his dad called Being Charlie. It's about a character that struggled with heroin addiction and homelessness. Quote, "It's not my life, but I went to a lot of these places, so I had a lot of these stories." That's what Nick told people roughly a decade ago. Nick also said, quote, "I was homeless in Maine. I was homeless in New Jersey. I was homeless in Texas. I spent nights on the street. I spent weeks on the street. It was not fun," end quote. Now, on the Dopey podcast, Reiner talked about how he found himself during times of sobriety longing to move back to Los Angeles to get back into his old lifestyle.
What ended your sober run?
I don't know. I just didn't want to be away from home, and I just wanted to come back home.
But you also wanted to get back to smoking weed and whatever. I'm not judging you, Nick. I'm just like the show. Like there's a billion or there's thousands.
You know what it really was?
What?
You know what it really was? It was like I kind of knew that I wanted to relapse, basically. I didn't even want to call it a relapse. I just wanted to get back to my old life of like smoking weed, kind of taking some pills, like doing whatever I wanted.
Yeah.
And I knew that if I started to do it back in Maine, I wouldn't really be able to do it.
Again, that was Nick Reiner on a podcast called Dopey back in 2018. Now, after his parents were found dead inside their home on Sunday, his sister allegedly told police that she believed Nick may be the person who did it. And that leads us to these pictures that were posted to social media by the Los Angeles Police Department, but they've been deleted since. And they allegedly show the arrest of Nick for the murders of his parents. Now, Nick was taken into custody roughly 15 miles away from his parents' home. People magazine reporting that it was near the campus of the University of Southern California. TMZ is also reporting that Nick fled to a hotel in Santa Monica after the alleged murders. Staff at that hotel discovered the room covered in blood. Bed sheets were allegedly covering the windows. TMZ says that Nick checked into the Pierside Santa Monica hotel with a credit card around 4 a.m. on Sunday. Now, remember, Nick's parents, Rob and Michele Reiner, their bodies were not discovered until 3:30 in the afternoon the next day. Now, TMZ says witnesses described Nick looking, quote, tweaked out. The outlet also says that there were no signs at that point that he had been in a violent confrontation. But remember, they say that there was a ton of blood found in that hotel room after he left. Now, if the timing of when Nick checked into the hotel is correct, it would have been just hours after what's being described as a disturbing scene, an alarming scene that played out at a holiday party hosted by comedian Conan O'Brien. TMZ claims that Nick got into a, quote, very loud argument with his dad Saturday night that was loud enough for other people to hear at this party. Now, the report also says that Michele had grown increasingly concerned in recent months about Nick's mental health and his substance abuse issues. Right now, it's also being reported that as Nick is being held in the LA County Jail, that he is reportedly on suicide watch. Friends told the New York Post that this was not the first time that Nick had allegedly been violent, but they did not believe that it could get to the point of murder. One media outlet says that friends described Nick as a ticking time bomb. Join us now to talk more about what could happen next in this case is Nima Rahmani, former federal prosecutor and president of West Coast Trial Lawyers. It's always great to have you on Law and Crime. This story taking place where you are out in Los Angeles. So today, Alan Jackson, we'll talk about him in just a moment, but he says that Nick Reiner is not cleared to appear in court or move from the jail to the courthouse. What exactly does that mean?
That means that there's a medical reason why he can't be physically present in court. Obviously, the defendant in any case, but especially a murder case, has the right to be present at all court appearances, including the initial arraignment. But if there's some reason And if that's related to stab wounds or cuts or anything of that sort, that he can't be present, he's not going to be cleared by sheriff's deputies and medical personnel here in Los Angeles County Jail to be transferred to court. He may be under medical observation. Now, there were some reports that after the stabbings, he went to a hotel in Santa Monica, which is just adjacent to Brentwood here in Los Angeles. And again, these reports are that there was a significant amount of blood in the bed and in the bathtub. So if that's the case, maybe he was injured during the course of this attack.
Could it also mean any sort of like mental health evaluation could be ongoing at this point, or typically if it's like what we're hearing that he's not medically cleared, that it'd have to be for a physical injury?
It could be mental health related. It could be drug related, right? There are reports that Nick Reiner had a significant substance abuse problem and has been in and out of rehab. Obviously, we don't have a urine analysis or anything of that sort. This is just, according to reports here in Los Angeles, that he was acting erratically at the Christmas party the day before on Saturday, and hotel personnel on Sunday, and him being near USC in downtown Los Angeles when he was arrested, which is, a good 10 to 15 miles away from, where the murders happened and where the hotel is. So obviously this is all speculation, but it could absolutely be mental health related or drug related. I don't know if it's necessarily going to be a legal defense in the case, but it may be a reason why he's not in court today.
Let's dive into the legal defense a little bit. We talked about a case that Alan Jackson took on out at Pepperdine involving a young man who allegedly drove a vehicle and killed 4 college students. Alan Jackson took that case on. He also took on the case of course, Karen Reed. But now he's taking on this one. No vehicle involved. This is going to be someone, I don't know how much of a whodunit it may be. We'll see as it plays out. But what does Alan Jackson bring to the table in this situation?
Alan Jackson is very well respected. He has a lot of experience. He's handled a lot of big cases, but he's really going to have to pull a rabbit out of his hat on this one. This is going to be a very difficult case to defend. And I'll go through some of the possible defenses. One is not guilty by reason of insanity. That is a very high burden here in California. So what would happen is you have a trial as to whether Nick Reiner did it, and then a trial on whether he was legally insane at the time. And for legal insanity, it's under the McNaughton test here in California, but essentially you can't know right from wrong, And the reason why I think this will likely fail is if you're having an argument with your parents the day before, you know who your parents are, you're at least arguing about something, that is not insanity, right? Insanity, you think you're killing a demon or an alien, God's telling you to do it. I mean, it's a high burden, and the burden is actually on the defense, and jurors are pretty skeptical about it, so I would be surprised if the insanity defense works.
We know that he has had, and it's well documented, like he has struggled with demons in his life in terms of addiction, homelessness, has been in and out of rehab to his own account more than a dozen times. And then TMZ, and a lot of this at this point has come through like the TMZ, People Magazine kind of outlets, and LAPD haven't said too much, but there were witnesses in a TMZ article I read at the Santa Monica hotel that saw him and said that he looked, quote, tweaked out. Could any of that factor into a defense, that this is a guy who has been impacted by issues of addiction, and that could have played a role into whatever played out inside the house the night that his parents were killed?
And look, here in LA, TMZ and People Magazine, they really have their pulse on the city. They have a lot of good sources. So I know sometimes people look down on those outlets, but they break news. Look, I'm really close to the courthouse. Sometimes I'll file documents, and TMZ will get a copy of the pleading before I even get my own copy back. We represent celebrities. We sue a lot of celebrities. So they definitely know what they're doing when it comes to reporting most of the time. So I wouldn't discount what they're reporting. Now, assuming that he has drug use, right, is that a legal defense? No, with one exception. Voluntary drug or alcohol abuse is not a legal defense. but there is one way it may factor into the case. It may negate the premeditation for first-degree murder. So, typically if you get into an argument with someone, you go back and you get a weapon and you come back, that's premeditation. We actually covered this on Law and Crime in the Nipsey Hussle case. That's what happened here in LA, right? An argument happened, someone goes, got a gun, came back. In this case, it appears that Rob Reiner and Michele Reiner were killed with a knife. Now, I don't know if Nick brought the knife with him or, it was at the home, but the fact that that argument and the murder happened after, that's evidence of premeditation. Now, the drug use may be able to negate that premeditation, and that is huge because it may take first-degree murder with special circumstances, which would be a mandatory life without the possibility of parole case here in California because we don't have the death penalty. It would make it a 25 to life case. So certainly not a home run win by any stretch, but under the circumstances where I don't think there's any self-defense argument here. I mean, he's 32, his parents are significantly older, right? I can't imagine this being a self-defense case, but maybe something will come out. I don't think it's a manslaughter case, heat of passion, right? Too much time, I think, had passed since the argument and the murder. So if Alan Jackson can get this down to second-degree murder, I think that would be a win, and that's probably really the only path that he has, based on the very limited information, of course, that we have now.
Yeah, a lot more information is expected to come out. For the prosecutors on this case, I'm sure in Los Angeles, if a son was accused of this crime and it was the Smith family and no one's ever heard of these people, it would still be like a regional story, and I'm sure like the True Crime podcast would talk about it. The fact we're talking about Rob Reiner and he is Hollywood royalty and all of that, I mean, I think President Obama said he was going to visit with him that night, and they had plans to get together. I mean, this is a guy who had a lot of power. As a prosecutor, when you're like how much does that factor into the story that you're telling in a courtroom, as opposed to whatever the evidence is on scene that shows that this person is accused of killing his parents, and it doesn't matter who the identity is?
Chris, this is probably going to be the biggest case since OJ, in my opinion, because of it has the Menendez brothers, right? A son killing his parents, right? It has the celebrity factor, right? In terms of who the victims were, Rob Reiner, again, Hollywood icon. But you're going to have the who's who of witnesses in this case testifying at trial. And believe me, I do think this case will go to trial. You're going to have Conan O'Brien. You're going to have folks like Larry David, Billy Crystal. I mean, there's images of them in tears. I mean, the Reiners rubbed elbows with Hollywood elite, and they were all percipient witnesses to a lot of this. And again, because there's no death penalty, and because I can't see LA County District Attorney Nathan Hochman giving any type of deal, again, I got to put my lawyer disclaimer, things can change, of course, but the way I view this right now, this is going to be a huge case, probably sometime in 2027 when this goes to trial. It's probably going to take some time, maybe late 2026, but more likely 2027. I mean, we're talking about it right now, but this is going to be a huge, huge trial, both in terms of the celebrity factor, the gruesomeness, the tragedy, and frankly, the witnesses that are going to appear. I mean, obviously we cover a lot of big cases here on Law and Crime, but I think this is going to be more watched than even cases like Johnny Depp, Tyler Robinson, Charlie Kirk, Luigi Mangione, the biggest cases that we've covered, Brian Koberger. I think this is going to draw more attention than all of them.
And such a big part of it, like you talked about Conan O'Brien. So the night before, they're at this holiday party at Conan O'Brien's house. I'm sure, major celebrities were at that party and apparently witnessed a massive outburst argument that Rob Reiner had with Nick Reiner. And then hours later, Rob Reiner and his wife, Michelle, they end up dead. How does the fact that that happened hours before, how could that factor into the evidence that the prosecution presents? Because then at the same time, we don't know how long after the Reiners were killed, but you still have this moment where obviously there was some sort of issue within the family that became very public at this party.
Chris, I think that holiday party is the strongest evidence in the case. It's the motive, it's the premeditation, and it's what probably puts Nick Reiner away for life. Again, Alan Jackson's great. I'm sure he's going to have some sort of alternate theory of the case. We saw that very effectively in the Karen Reed trial. But the issue is that argument, it really takes out the potential defenses in the case, right? Look, we cover a lot of homicide cases here on Law and Crime, and you'll see the defenses primarily fall into one of three categories, right? It wasn't me. Well, seems like it was him, right? And I imagine this is no Brian Koberger. There's going to be a lot of forensic evidence in this case that ties Nick Reiner to the scene. There's probably video evidence. There's probably DNA. There's going to be a lot out there. So then the other type of defense that you typically see is self-defense, right? But again, don't necessarily think it probably applies. I mean, Rob Reiner's old. His mom's old. I mean, I say that respectfully. Older than Nick Reiner, who's 32. And then you start seeing defenses when it comes to a mental state, right? It was an accident, right? It was manslaughter. I didn't mean to do it, right? And maybe you can get there, but again, that evidence of premeditation is very strong. You get in a fight with your parents, there's something you're arguing about, and somehow both of them get stabbed. And again, I don't know if this is true or not, but People Magazine was reporting that their throats were slit.
Right.
Again, I don't think that's been reported by other outlets, and I don't want to spread misinformation. It may well be true, but if you slit someone's throat, Chris, you're probably going up behind them to do that, right? I mean, it doesn't get more premeditated than that. So again, very preliminary. I don't want folks in the comments to, hate on me if a week later things change, but from what has been reported right now, the very limited information, this is a very strong prosecution case, and Alan Jackson has his hands full.
Yeah, because you think of, it hasn't been officially released where the bodies were found in the home. This is obviously a mansion, so what type of security system did they have? What type of cameras were able to capture anything that was going on at the house? I don't know if you'd be able to answer this question, but I think of Alan Jackson. He's an incredibly expensive lawyer, and the defense for a double murder, I'm sure, is going to cost a lot of money. And then I look at Nick Reiner, and here's someone who lived in his parents' guest house. Clearly, the parents had a lot of money. He doesn't seem to really, it's not like he really had much of a job. He did a movie with his dad in 2016, but it does appear that he's someone who lived off his parents, but they're also the victims in this case. I guess, how does someone pay for Alan Jackson if
that's a great question. Because under California's Slayer statute, you kill your parents. I don't care if there's a will, a trust, life insurance. You're out as a beneficiary. You don't get any of it. So the law presumes that the murderer predeceases the victim. So, and there were some reports, again, they're just reports, that Nick Reiner was homeless for a while. So I don't know if Alan Jackson's doing this pro bono. He thinks it's good for, obviously, in terms of PR and publicity. Like I said, there's going to be no case like it. Or Nick Reiner may be found innocent and actually inherit from his parents at some point or come into money. But yeah, this is not someone that I would think can afford the millions of dollars it would take to hire Alan Jackson and take a double murder case all the way through jury trial.
And then just lastly, looking at Nick Reiner as he's someone who grew up with incredible amounts of privilege, but then at the same time also has struggled with addiction, which a lot of families of different tax brackets can relate to that struggle across this country. I think of who the jurors might be in LA County. Probably not millionaires. I mean, maybe a few, but how could people look at him and see him as this person who kind of rode his parents' coattails, it seems, though struggled with addiction? He had more access to resources to treat addiction than, a blue-collar family would be able to afford if they had a family member who was struggling. How have you seen in some of these cases where addiction plays a role, how jurors kind of handle that, especially if it's someone of wealth?
Look, obviously, drug addiction and mental health issues are real, and they're a big problem in our society, and especially in our criminal justice system. I don't want to be insensitive. I don't know. Maybe Jackson will put on some sort of abuse case like the Menendez brothers did, right? And maybe, the Reiners won't be sympathetic. But by all accounts, Rob Reiner is considered one of the kindest, nicest, charitable folks here in Hollywood. His reputation is really pristine. Now, maybe folks don't like his political views, but I don't think anyone has ever said that Rob Reiner has spoken a mean word or done a, disrespectful act to anyone. Now, obviously, I don't know how he is as a father, but I don't think folks are going to have a whole lot of sympathy for Nick Reiner. They'll probably think he's some sort of Nepo baby, and, he had all the opportunities in the world and he squandered them, and he took his own parents' life. Again, I want to give Alan Jackson a chance, because I never would have thought that someone could have run over their police officer boyfriend in Massachusetts and folks would be on the side of the defendant, right? So, he's going to have a great defense and a great PR team. But again, I really do think he has an uphill battle here, because folks are not going to like Nick Reiner, or anyone for that matter, stabbing and killing both of their parents. It just doesn't make any sense, and the defense is going to have to try to make some sense of it. But I don't think they're going to be able to, again, unless there's something that comes out of the blue that I'm just unaware of.
Yeah, no doubt, though. The video today of Alan Jackson walking into the courthouse, you kind of had this moment where it's like, okay, here we go. He's now involved. Certainly, makes a very, very sad case, something that's going to be interesting to watch from a legal perspective going forward. Former federal prosecutor Nemo Romani, it's always great to have you on Law and Crime. We'll see where the story goes next.
Thanks, Chris. I'm sure we're going to be talking about this a lot in the coming months and maybe years.
Now, as the criminal justice system is now in control of this case, those who knew the Reiners continue to pay tribute to a true Hollywood power couple. Actress Jane Fonda wrote on Instagram, quote, "Rob and Michele Reiner were wonderful, caring, smart, funny, generous people, always coming up with ideas for how to make the world better, kinder. They had been helping me launch the committee for the First Amendment. I saw them the night before last, looking healthy and happy. I am reeling with grief, stunned." Then you have music legend Paul McCartney, who wrote on Facebook, "Life can be so unfair, and this tragedy proves it. His father, Carl Reiner, was a great humorist before him, and Rob followed in his dad's footsteps, doing a terrific job making many great films. I will always have fond memories of Rob, and the idea that he and his wife will no longer be in the world with us is heartbreaking. Thanks for all the humor. Rest in peace. Love, Paul." Then you have author Stephen King, another Hollywood heavyweight, saying, quote, "I'm horrified and saddened by the death of Rob Reiner and Michele. Wonderful friend, political ally, and brilliant filmmaker. Rest in peace, Rob. You always stood by me."